gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
Welcome to LMDtv. I'm Ashwini Vethakan. Joining us this week on Talking Business is the Managing Director of Access Projects, Dilshan Ferdinando. Welcome to the show, Dilshan. It's good to have you here with us.
Thank you for inviting me, LMT, and I'm very pleased to be here answering your questions on a very volatile situation in the country, and it's all go now.
Now, Dilshan, given Sri Lanka's volatile business climate, what is your take on the prevailing economic landscape?
Okay, so let's put it this way. I'm 60 years old, so I've been around, I've seen around, and when I was about 13 years old, this country had a government by Mrs. Sirimao Bandaranaike. And if anyone were to Google New York Times 1974 May 13, there's an article which is well worth reading. It is in that article as if in 1974 it was written as today. Food shortages, fuel shortages, the country living week to week. It describes the country's debt, lack of foreign exchange, poor taxation, subsidies, free education, free meals, free medical, imports being double of the exports. This is 1974 and it's in New York Times. Now, since 1974, we have had about 10 governments of all the main political parties. Nothing has changed since 1974 when we had 12 million Sri Lankans. And today we have 22 million Sri Lankans and we are still importing double of what we are producing. Nothing's changed. So in this case, the economic climate that you're asking about in the background has been the same for 47 years. And I don't actually see it being changing in the future as well. What we have is technically bursts of foreign exchange and then everybody having a good time until the crunch hits again. So it's nice to know, or not nice to know, but it's vital to know in 1970s, both India and Sri Lanka went with a begging bowl to China and USA for food, both India and Sri Lanka. We had at that time something called the Rubber Rice Pact, where we gave rubber in exchange for rice. And if you read that article, it says that at one point, Sri Lanka had rice only for a month. It was that bad in 1974. And I can assure you, I was around, I was 13 years old. So how is it that like India has improved and we haven't? You know, India went to the extent Mrs. Gandhi said, for all Indians, you have to forego a meal. And she went to USA to beg for wheat. And we have been stuck in the same group economically while India has flourished. And at that time, Mrs. Bandaranaike's slogan was, produce or perish. This is 1974 slogan, produce or perish. How true is that? So the only way out of this current economic climate is to improve production and reduce the handouts. So given this business climate that we have now, some industries and businesses will flourish, others will fail. It is the same as that happened in the 1974 era. And my take on the current economic landscape is it is a result of lazy people living on handouts. Each successive government is giving more and more subsidies without improving production. So this is the business climate that we live in. In my opinion, very little has changed since 1974. So our production is very poor. Our imports are half of our exports. I'm saying double, sorry. So only we, the people, can change this country by being productive and not importing anything from apples to kites.
The construction industry is considered as one of the barometers of economic development. Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, good question. So we all think that if we see buildings coming up, if we see roads built, if we see bridges built, that this is a sign of prosperity. And I'm sure in your lifetime, you would have seen like, Sri Lanka changing, highways coming up, beautiful waterfronts, hotels, all this happening in Sri Lanka. And then we think that, okay, fantastic, everything is all right. But now that you can't eat buildings or roads. So when we say that we use the building or the construction trade as a barometer of progress or economic development, I have a diverse or a different opinion of that. It's only an external signature that we have. It's not the real development. all the development that we see in Sri Lanka has been built on borrowed money. That's why we have roads, we have bridges, we have highways, we have everything, but we have no food. Can you imagine that we have vehicles, but no fuel to pump? So we have super highways, and how can the vehicles go on that? They got no diesel. So having the construction industry as a barometer for economic development, in my opinion, is okay for other countries which are kind of developed. But I think for us, the priorities are completely missed. And agriculture, industrial production, self-sufficiency, if those can be considered as barometers of economic development, I think it's far, far better. So to answer your question, in a very simple way is to say that I wouldn't consider construction industry alone as a barometer for economic development. I would probably like to add agriculture, industrial production, and self-sufficiency together into the same basket. And if we see development in all those areas together with the construction industry, yeah, then we can say that it's economic development. Otherwise, it might be just economic development with borrowed money.
In your view, what is the impact of government regulations on the growth of the industry?
Yeah, so basically we are talking about the construction industry, and usually the construction industry, the impact is mainly from concessions that are given by the government, taxation policy, and probably making it more easier for construction to happen by giving benefits to investment. If you look at the Colombo skyline today, and can we really say that this is a country with no money for fuel or food, and then we are living on a week-to-week basis? I mean, the question arises whether we as an industry requires policy changes, or does the government go and make industrial and agricultural production a priority? There is a thought that we must give opportunity for foreign contractors and foreign construction companies to come and do work in Sri Lanka on a competitive basis, effectively cheaper. But I think it's okay as long as we don't use borrowed money to pay them to take back to their own country. If we have excess foreign exchange, it's fully worthwhile to get anyone to come and do work in Sri Lanka. But if our foreign exchange is borrowed, then the government policy and regulations should not allow foreign companies to come and work here and take away borrowed funds. I don't believe so. I believe that there has to be a certain level of protectionism for the local industry, a certain level. I also believe that there has to be a level playing field in terms of foreign contractors and Sri Lankan contractors both working on same projects. But if a project can be very well managed by Sri Lankan contractors, there is no requirement for a foreign contractor. So regulations pertaining to foreign contractors working here do hurt the industry and also stifle our growth. So in terms of regulations, we have no protection for local products, except recently after the pandemic. But prior to that, there was nothing. If there is a duty-free project, it's import and supply to Sri Lanka, which means that whatever the percentage of foreign currency that comes as a direct investment, we'll say the bigger percentage goes out. So the regulations for the growth of the industry definitely has to look at the whole in a very holistic way, which can nurture the industry, give the best price to the investor, as well as moving forward in a sustainable manner. At present, most of the industries where we have local production are dead, except for a few. So I think mainly regulations pertaining to the construction industry needs to be completely revamped with new thinking. And it has to be holistic together with the attached industries like tourism, factories, agriculture. It has to be totally together. It can't be isolated and say that let's improve the construction industry and forget about the rest of it.
Now, Dilshan, how is the industry and the real estate sector faring in the wake of the shortage of construction materials in Sri Lanka?
That's a big question. The industry will survive, that's for sure. The industry has always survived through thick and thin. That is simply because the industry will find alternative materials, alternative means of fulfilling the demands of the construction industry. There will be delays, no doubt. But I'm always confident because the construction industry and the stakeholders are extremely smart and innovative people. So we, as the construction industry, in my opinion, will have a tough time, but we will survive. There is a social need to own one's own residence. And this is where the real estate sector comes in. We as a nation and as a social group do not still believe in rent. But when the interest rates on house building bank borrowing, so borrowing from the banks by the middle class, will rise above 2 digits, it will definitely stifle the real estate industry. We know very well that everybody wants to own a house. We also know very well that salaries do not keep rising in the same percentage as the rise of the raw material costs. So it will become more and more difficult for people to own houses. But it is what it is. People want to own houses and they will do whatever they can to own a house, even go abroad, earn in dollars, but come back and buy in Sri Lanka house. So in terms of this issues that are facing the industry in terms of the economic activity of the country, I would probably say that a handful of players will survive, developers. And even now, it is much less in terms of reliable developers in the marketplace compared to, let's say, 8 to 10 years ago. And it's very difficult to predict the future in terms of supply and demand because rising prices will mean that people will have to move further and further away from the city. So what people could probably uh, build and sell in real estate in the city centers is maybe around 3 to 5%. The rest of the market lies outside of the city of Colombo. When I say city of Colombo, we are looking at Patharamulla, Rajagiriya, towards Kadavata, towards Jayala, towards Horana. These are the areas where there's real estate market. And definitely it's a very, very challenging time for developers because you really can't predict your cost. At what price, if you start a project now, at what price will it end? So how does one set the purchase price for a buyer? And these projects take 2 3 years. So the whole economic activity or the economy of the country being very volatile, no one knows what is going to be the price of cement or steel in 3 months' time. We already know that with the war in Ukraine, that the oil prices have gone up. That in turn has an issue on the freight as well as raw materials. Everything is oil based. So we as a nation will face much more hardships. And in my opinion, the cost of housing and real estate development will go high. As a result, the demand will be less. But then, yet again, the social need to own one's own houses will remain. So these are the challenges that face the industry, especially the real estate sector. Shortage of materials is there, but I think shortage of materials will be circumvented by developers. They will find their way, but it's a shortage of money that will actually play the role and the uncertainty of cost of construction.
And on that note, we'll be going in for a short break.
You love the feeling of being renewed. To stay beautiful every single day. To breathe just like we do. Because you are truly delicate. Protecting the ones who've been with us through the years. With Sayalac Care, the only wood coating that truly protects you. Sayalac Wood Coatings from JAT.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation with the Managing Director of Access Projects, Dilshan Ferdinando. Now, Dilshan, the foreign exchange crisis must be affecting the industry in more ways than one. Can you comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is like shooting oneself in the leg. We have been trained to live on imports. Even industries here are closing down, all due to a free inflow of imports. So there's no long-term plan, absolutely no long-term plan in Sri Lanka in a holistic way for local value addition, for protection and understanding by the authorities to curtail imports. See, they are going to prioritize the foreign direct investment and other investments and grant all concessions at the cost of the local industry. But we did that for many, many years. Since J.R. Jayawardana's time, we have done that, a free economy. But that hasn't solved the foreign exchange gap between the import and the export bill. So there is a thought that as a country, we are too small to produce and that we must be like Singapore. But Singapore became what it is now, having a local industry. Those industries developed after Singapore became a developed nation, from a developing nation. We are still trying to run before we can even crawl. So we have to reduce the imports to bare minimum. And when we do that, industries will pop up and they will fill the void. everything that the industry consumes requires foreign exchange. So any shortage, it has a major impact on the industry. Whether it is cement, whether it is steel, whether it is door locks, you name it, everything is imported. There is no big industry here at all. Even clinker for cement is not in this country, it is imported. So everything is imported. God knows what we produce other than for sand. So our foreign exchange crunch that has hit the industry is simply because we don't have enough foreign exchange and we spend the foreign exchange on totally unrequired stuff. So when we as a nation go and import apples and bees honey and various things and we spend the foreign exchange on that, we don't have foreign exchange for the raw material to be imported for the construction industry. So yes, we are hit bad, but in my opinion, the industry will survive, although it is hit bad.
And how is the industry faring in terms of its labor resources?
Yeah, there's a massive dearth of labor in the country. Massive dearth. There are no people who want to come and work in the construction industry. So sometime back, we had labor coming in from India, China, and Bangladesh, Nepal. That has also reduced to a great extent, although still permits are given to have people coming in from those areas. But the big question is, why would anybody want to work this country when everything is free and given far below its value? Everybody who is educated free of charge wants a government job as a first priority. So which means going to work late and then going home at 4 o'clock. And where one person can do the work, you have 8 people. So efficiency is very low. So given that situation, all the children in this country who are educated do not want to come and work in the construction industry, getting their hands dirty. They don't want to be bricklayers, they don't want to be painters, they don't want to be people who carry things from one place to the other. So it is a huge problem facing the industry in terms of labor, especially the M&E section, that is the electrical and the plumbing section is even hit really bad. They don't have enough people to work in this country. So I think what will happen is that eventually the cost of these construction areas will rise. And what happens to the people is that most of the young people will become three-wheel drivers and not do any work. So it is a dilemma for the country where the construction industry in itself is suffering greatly by lack of workers. And if 3 years back we could muster, let's say 200-300 people for a job site, we'll be lucky to muster 30-40 people at present. So there has to be a social change that is broad-based to fix this problem. There has to be respectability granted to people working in the construction industry. And I think the remuneration is fine. I would probably think that a skilled worker today takes home more than 3,500 rupees a day, so which is actually more than office worker with a degree. So there is no problem in the money for paying these people. It's just that there are no people. It's not a money problem, but it's just that nobody wants to come and work in the construction industry.
Architecture is also a vital arm of construction. So in terms of talent, how is the industry's human talent faring?
I think to answer that question, we must say that Sri Lanka has always been blessed by talented architects and engineers. They are resilient and they will conform to every challenge that comes their way. And when I say challenge, if there's no paint in the country, they will come up with a solution. If there's no cement in the country, they'll come with a solution. If there are no foreign goods, construction goods in the country, they will come up with a solution. This is a set of people that have risen from the 1970s when there were no imports and what is Sri Lankan became fashionable, from Samara painted walls to the style of Mr. Baba having a tile roof and various other components that are now considered as a Sri Lankan style. People love it. It suits Sri Lanka. The young people love it. There is minimalistic architecture that is going. There's no end to talent in Sri Lanka. So the architecture and design in Sri Lanka is not dependent on foreign exchange or policy. They are simply dependent on ingenuity and talent. So to answer you, there is no dearth of talent in this country. This country produces the most fantastic architects. They are very sensitive to the environment. They are sensitive to cost and they're sensitive to what is available. And they will do the most fantastic designs with whatever that is available. To answer the question, again, the human talent in design and architecture in this country is limitless or boundless. There are so many talented young architects who are churning out very, very habitable, socially conscious designs.
Well, this conversation has been a real eye-opener, especially considering the topics of the current import restrictions faced in Sri Lanka, as well as the other issues facing the construction industry. Thank you for joining us on the show this evening, Dilshan.
Thank you very much and wish you all the best.
Coming up, we have the latest updates from Sri Lanka's economy. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the show, and here's the latest updates from Sri Lanka's economy. The February LMD Nielsen IQ Business Confidence Index survey conducted during the first week of last month continues to paint a bleak picture of Sri Lanka's economic outlook, with perceptions in business circles about the next 12 months continuing to be downbeat. A notable majority of 76% of poll respondents expect conditions to worsen, which is 3 percentage points lower than in the previous month. As for survey participants who expressed optimism, a mere 7% from 6% in January say the economy will improve in the coming 12 months, while 17% believe it will stay the same during this time from 15% in the preceding month. On the biz prospect front, expectations continue to be somewhat muted, with roughly 2/3 of respondents expecting their sales volumes to get better in the 12 months ahead, which is by and large a repeat of the survey findings in January. This compares unfavorably with what corporate executives said in December. A healthy 86% of business people who spoke to the pollsters said their sales volumes will improve at the time. If there's any good news in Nielsen IQ's latest report on economic perceptions among the business community, it comes in the form of an increase from 36% to over half at 51%, revealing that their sales volumes have increased compared to last year. As for the short term, there's been a slight uptick by 3 percentage points to 46% in the outlook in the eyes of business people surveyed. The investment climate continues to be viewed with disdain by corporates, with an eye-opening majority of 88%, up from 82% in the preceding month, describing it as poor or very poor. And whereas nearly a fifth at 18% of the survey sample viewed the investment climate as good or fair in January, only 12% say so a month later. The share of corporates planning to increase their staff numbers over the next 6 months has fallen to a mere 5% from 11% in January, which may well be the result of the economic squeeze employers are now facing. On the other hand, 9 in 10 poll respondents say their businesses will remain the status quo vis-a-vis the workforce, while only 5% expect to reduce numbers in the coming 6 months versus 87% and 2% respectively in the previous month. And that's all the time we have for you this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.